My name is Lila, I'm 32 years old, and I've always been considered the odd one out in my family. Despite everything I've accomplished, the truth is, I never really fit their mold. When I showed up at my parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner at the Seaside Pavilion, I thought, maybe things would finally be different. I had been telling myself that this was the moment we could reconnect, that maybe they would finally see me for who I had become. Instead, the looks on their faces weren't filled with joy or surprise, they were filled with shock. "You weren't invited," my father muttered coldly, his words slicing through the lively atmosphere. Before I could even process it, he motioned to security. "Get this woman out of here." He didn't know that I had secretly funded half of the event he was celebrating in my absence. I walked away that night without creating a scene, but once I got home, I cancelled over $60,000 worth of support I had been giving to my parents and siblings behind the scenes. Minutes later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, messages, even people pounding on my door. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when you finally stop begging for acceptance and start demanding respect. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a polished neighborhood in Charleston, South Carolina, where appearances were everything. My parents, Thomas and Evelyn, spent their lives focused on image, reputation, and status. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect Southern family, holiday portraits in matching outfits, perfectly trimmed hedges, dinner parties with all the right people. But on the inside, I always felt like I was trying to wear someone else's skin. My brother Daniel was the golden child, following in Dad's footsteps with a high-paying job in real estate development. My sister Vivian became the doctor my mother always wished she had become. And then there was me, Lila, the daughter who loved painting, writing, and storytelling. The day I told my parents I was going to art school instead of law school, the disappointment in their eyes was so sharp it felt physical. "Art is a pastime, not a profession," my father sneered more than once. My mother, with her sugar-sweet but cutting tone, added, "We just don't want you to fail, honey. Not everyone can survive in something so unstable." That was the first moment I realized I'd have to carve out my own place in the world. And I did. But not without sacrifice. I moved out at 18, juggling 3 jobs while attending college full-time. There were weeks I lived off peanut butter sandwiches, months where I barely slept more than 4 hours a night, and even one terrifying visit to the ER for exhaustion. Through it all, I never once asked my parents for a dime. My pride wouldn't let me. Ironically, by the time I turned 30, I had built something far beyond what any of them imagined. My design agency, Bright Horizon Studios, grew from a single desk in my apartment into a thriving team of 30 designers serving clients across the country. Last year alone, we cleared a 7-figure profit. Did my parents ever acknowledge that? Of course not. At gatherings, Dad would proudly introduce Daniel as our son, the property mogul, and Vivian as our daughter, the brilliant surgeon. When it came to me, all he'd ever say was, "This is our daughter, Lila," before quickly changing the subject. It didn't matter that I was more financially successful than both my siblings combined. To them, I was still the child who had strayed from their carefully drawn blueprint. And yet, despite the years of cold shoulders and dismissive comments, I kept trying to reconcile. I thought maybe one day, if I showed them love and support, they might love me back the same way. What they didn't know, though, was that I was the one quietly keeping them afloat. 3 years ago, when Dad's health forced him into early retirement, my parents started struggling with their mortgage. They thought they were receiving a forgotten pension benefit, but in reality, I had set up an anonymous transfer that funneled $3,000 into their account every month. When Vivian wanted to buy a home, I quietly funneled $50,000 through a legal grant so she would never know it came from me. When Daniel's divorce left him drowning in student debt, I paid off $75,000, disguising it as a loan forgiveness program. Most recently, when my parents wanted to celebrate their 40th anniversary but couldn't afford it, I stepped in once again. I paid for half of a grand celebration at the seaside pavilion, asking the event planner to make sure the credit looked like it came from all of us. I even bought them a dream gift, 2 tickets to Italy, their bucket list trip, complete with prepaid tours and excursions. That night, I arrived early, dressed in a flowing emerald green gown. I carried their gift wrapped in silver paper and tied with a gold ribbon. For the first time in years, I actually felt hopeful. But when I gave my name to the hostess, she frowned. "I'm sorry, miss, your name isn't on the list." A laugh bubbled out of me nervously. "That has to be a mistake. I'm their daughter." But as I peeked past her into the dining room, my smile faded. There they were, my parents, Daniel and Vivian, all gathered with their spouses, glasses of champagne in hand, laughing like everything was perfect. Nearly 40 guests filled the room, enjoying themselves. As if I didn't exist. I walked past the hostess anyway, clutching the gift box tightly. My mother saw me first. Her smile froze. She leaned toward my father, whispering quickly. His head turned, and when his eyes met mine, his face hardened instantly. "Lila," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "What are you doing here?" My voice wavered. "It's your anniversary. Why wouldn't I be here?" My mother's hand fluttered to her pearls. "Sweetheart, we didn't expect you. This is just a small gathering for close family." Close family. The words echoed like a slap. My siblings looked down at their feet. No one spoke. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I helped arrange this." "There's no mistake," my father snapped. "You weren't invited. You don't belong here." The guests fell silent. The only sound was the clinking of glasses being set down, one by one. I held out the box. "I brought you something. A gift." "You can leave it on the table," my mother said flatly, refusing to take it. My chest burned with humiliation. "You should know. I paid for half of this party." Gasps rippled across the room. My father's face flushed scarlet. "That's ridiculous. Daniel and Vivian planned this." "No," I said quietly, "I did." He stepped closer, his voice low but cutting. "You've always had a flair for drama, Lila. Always. Craving attention. Security." A tall man in a black suit approached hesitantly. Guests whispered in shock. "Escort this woman out," my father ordered coldly. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he spat the words. "I will never forget. Get this beggar out of here. She is nothing but an embarrassment." The room went still. Even the security guard looked uncertain. Tears blurred my vision, but I lifted my chin. "It's okay," I told the guard softly. "I'll leave." I set the gift down, straightened my shoulders, and walked out without looking back. Not once would I let them see me crumble. Only when I reached my car did I finally break, sobbing as every cruel word replayed in my mind. That was the moment something inside me shifted. When I got home that night, my tears dried into something else, a cold, sharp clarity I had never felt before. For years, I had been their silent safety net. That ended now. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. One by one, I dismantled everything I had built for them behind the curtain. First, the monthly $3,000 transfer disguised as a retirement supplement. I cancelled it immediately. Then the landscaping service, the housekeeper, the meal delivery plan I had arranged when Mom complained about cooking, all gone with a few clicks. The so-called grant for Vivian's house. I contacted the lawyer and stopped the final $30,000 installment. The prepaid Italy trip. Cancelled. The refund would hit my account within days. And finally, I called the event planner. "This is Lila," I said evenly. "Please inform the venue that my portion of the funding is withdrawn. They'll need to collect the balance from the hosts." By the time I was done, more than $60,000 in current and future support had evaporated. For the first time, I felt free. Not an hour later, my phone lit up like fireworks. Dozens of missed calls, frantic voicemails. The first was from Dad, his voice slurred from champagne. "Lila, the restaurant is saying there's an issue with payment. Call me back immediately." The second was angrier. "What the hell do you think you're doing? They're threatening to charge us $20,000 more." By the third, he was yelling, "If you don't fix this, there will be consequences. Your mother is in tears. Is that what you wanted?" The text started around 2 a.m., Mom begging me to reconsider, Daniel accusing me of ruining everything, Vivian demanding to know why the bank had called about a cancelled transfer. By sunrise, the tone shifted. My father's last voicemail was shaky, almost defeated. "Lila, we need to talk. Please. It's important." I didn't answer. I made coffee, went to work, and carried on with my day as if nothing had happened. My company wouldn't pause for family drama. But the ripple effect was instant. My cousin messaged me from the party, asking where I was because my parents told everyone I had a work emergency. My aunt reached out, confused and worried. They had spun a whole story to cover my absence. Lies stacked on lies. That evening, as I sat at my desk finishing client notes, my assistant buzzed me nervously. "Lila, your father is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he refuses to leave." I sighed, steadying myself. "Tell him I'm in a meeting." Minutes later, my office door swung open. Dad stood there, disheveled, eyes red, pride shattered. "Lila," he rasped, "we need to talk." "This is my workplace," I said coldly. "You don't get to barge in. You left me no choice. You cut everything off. The mortgage, the services, your mother and I can't manage. Why are you doing this? Why?" My laugh was bitter. "Because you called me a beggar in front of your friends. Because you had security throw me out of a party I paid for. Because I'm done funding people who treat me like an embarrassment." He faltered, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You paid for the party?" "Yes," I said simply. "I have receipts for every dime I've given this family. Mortgage payments, Vivian's down payment, Daniel's debts. Over $200,000 in 3 years. All from the daughter who doesn't belong." For the first time in my life, my father had no words. He just sank into the chair across from my desk, looking small. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" he finally whispered. "Would it have mattered? Would you have respected me then? Or would you have just taken more, expecting it as your right?" His silence was my answer. I gathered my things, standing tall. "You want support? Ask Daniel and Vivian. Ask the children you actually value. As for me, I'm done." And with that, I walked out, leaving him sitting in my office, staring at the floor. For once, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt like the only one finally breaking free. For 3 days, the calls kept coming, sometimes angry, sometimes desperate. I ignored them all. But on the 4th day, the storm arrived at my office. My assistant looked uneasy when she knocked. "Lila, they're here. Your whole family. Your parents. Daniel, Vivian, they're in the lobby. They say they won't leave until you speak with them." A cold wave swept through me. Still, I forced myself to stay calm. "Fine. Put them in the small conference room. I'll meet them when I can." When I finally entered, they sat around the table, tension hanging heavy in the air. My father's face was pale, my mother's eyes swollen from crying. Daniel was pacing, Vivian staring at the floor. "You have 30 minutes, I said flatly. "I have work to do." Dad spoke first. "We need to talk about the financial arrangements. The mortgage, the services." "There's nothing to discuss," I cut him off. "I was helping you. Now I'm not." "But why hide it?" Mom pleaded. "Why not tell us you were paying our bills?" "Because it wouldn't have mattered. You never respected me. You never introduced me as anything but Lila, while Daniel and Vivian were paraded around as trophies. You never invited me to events. Like your anniversary. What difference would it have made if you knew I was the one keeping you afloat? Silence. The kind that tells you've hit the truth too hard for anyone to deny. Finally, Vivian spoke, her voice thin. So this is punishment. For not inviting you? No, I said firmly. This is consequence. 4 years of dismissing me. For calling me a beggar in front of strangers. For pretending I didn't exist while you spent money I provided. Daniel's face tightened. We didn't know about the party. We thought Vivian and I paid. You thought wrong, I snapped. And you never asked how Mom and Dad managed their lifestyle on retirement and part-time income. The house, the vacations, the services, it was me. Every bit of it. Their faces shifted as the truth landed. Confusion. Shame. Guilt. Dad cleared his throat. I don't understand. If you resented us so much, why give so much? Because that's what family is supposed to do, I said quietly. Support each other. Even when it's not returned. Even when it hurts. I hoped one day, it might change things. That maybe I would be enough. Mom's tears spilled over. I never knew you felt this way. I never meant to make you feel less. But you did, I said, my voice steady. Every time you praised them and ignored me. Every time you called my career a hobby. Every time you excluded me. And the night of your anniversary, you proved it in front of everyone. Then, the words I never expected. Mom's voice, fragile and raw, we didn't invite you, because I was afraid. Afraid of what? I asked. That people would see how successful you've become. More successful than Daniel, more than Vivian. I was jealous, Lila. Jealous that you built something without our approval, without our help. That you proved us wrong. I couldn't stand the thought of our friends asking why we never brag about you. Her confession hit like a punch. I had spent years believing they were ashamed of me, when in truth, they were jealous. So you erased me, I whispered. Because you couldn't handle my success. Mom nodded through her tears. It wasn't rational. It was pride. And I'm sorry. The room was thick with discomfort. Daniel finally muttered, I had no idea you paid my debts. I would have thanked you. Would you? I challenged. Or would you have been humiliated that your little sister had to bail you out? His silence was enough. Vivian, trying to hold her ground, asked, Are you going to restart the payments? The mortgage, the services? No, I said simply. That chapter is over. You'll need to figure it out yourselves. But we can't afford what you were covering, she pressed. Not my problem, I said, the words freeing me as they left my lips. As they gathered their things, Dad lingered. His voice was low, almost broken. The party. The venue. Said someone withdrew funding during the event. Was that you? Yes, I said without flinching. After you humiliated me, I refused to bankroll the celebration. His shoulders sagged. That $20,000 went on my card. Money we don't have. I opened the door. You made your choices. I've made mine. They filed out, leaving me standing there, heart pounding, but lighter than I'd felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't begging for a place in the family. I was defining my own worth. 2 weeks passed in silence. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the invisible weight of my family's needs. I focused on my business, enjoyed dinners with friends, and felt the freedom of not constantly chasing approval. Then the calls started trickling back in, this time softer. First from Daniel, then Vivian, and finally from Mom. Each wanted to talk. Each claimed they were ready to see things differently. Daniel was the first I agreed to meet. Over coffee, he surprised me by admitting something I had never expected. I envied you, he confessed. You had the courage to do what you wanted. I followed Dad's path. And now I'm stuck in a career I don't even enjoy. I never stood up for you at the party because it was easier to keep my role as the golden child. I'm sorry. For the first time, I saw my brother as more than the favored son. I saw him as someone trapped, too. Vivian reached out next, though her tone was different. Over lunch, she tried to justify the family's choices, but eventually her defenses cracked. She admitted she had always felt pressure to be perfect and that my success threatened the narrative she had lived her whole life. When you struggled, it made sense, she admitted. When you thrived, it made me question myself. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. Then came Mom. She showed up at my house one quiet Sunday, without Dad. For once, she didn't arrive polished and composed. She looked smaller, tired, vulnerable. "I've been thinking a lot," she began softly. "I was jealous of you, Lila. Of your courage. Of the life you built without us. I gave up my dream of medicine to marry your father. I told myself it was the right choice, but watching you succeed, it reminded me of everything I let go." Her honesty cut through years of bitterness. I reached for her hand. "Mom, I never judged you. I just wanted the freedom to make my own choices." For hours, we talked, really talked, for the first time in my adult life. It didn't erase the pain, but it planted the seed of something new. Dad was last. He asked to meet at a park we used to visit when I was little. He sat on a bench, staring at the pond. "I've never been good at apologies," he admitted. "The things I said at that party, they were unforgivable. I lashed out because I couldn't control you. And what I can't control, I've always tried to diminish." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I didn't promise forgiveness, but I agreed to try. And weeks later, we sat together as a family. This time in my parents' new condo, smaller and humbler than the house they'd lost. It wasn't the glamorous dinners of the past, but it was real. And for once, I felt like we were speaking honestly. I never resumed their financial support. I never went back to being the silent provider. Instead, I drew clear boundaries. And to my surprise, they began respecting them. The biggest lesson I learned: love without respect is a chain. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to break it. True family isn't about money, status, or appearances. It's about honesty, respect, and seeing each other for who we really are. So if you've ever found yourself giving endlessly while receiving nothing back, remember this: your value doesn't depend on who recognizes it. Sometimes walking away isn't cruelty. It's self-love. And sometimes, it's the only way to finally find peace.